Welcome. I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on mysterious and weird, true stories, from glitches to the paranormal. This is my channel's monthly compendium, ending Monday, January 3rd, 2022. Case file number 457, written by Blar Blar, Secrets of a Christmas, Lost in Time. Okay, so first of all, I just want to say that ever since I moved to Nevada, the weirdest things have been happening, but this is by far one of the most confusing things that's ever happened to me. Basically, I went back almost a week in time. I've been keeping a pretty good track of the dates this month because Christmas, obviously, but also because my baby is 5 months old on the 13th. Another reason is because my husband works on Christmas, so we were going to have it a few days early on my husband's next day off, which was supposed to be the 19th, but he worked an extra day. I've been busy with Christmas stuff, but I've still been checking the dates on the front of my iPhone. Last Thursday, after the 14th and 15th came and went, my husband got home from work and I checked the auto date on the front of my phone, and it was the 16th. And we both had a conversation about how we missed the 5-month mark and how this month is just flying by. My husband was scheduled to work 14 days straight after the 3rd to cover someone's vacation, which is also confusing because his coworker came back from vacation already, and it's already supposed to be my husband's day off. There is just no way it's the 13th today. I vividly remember it being past the 16th, and thinking it made perfect sense. Also, we had our Christmas celebration today. I've been planning it for weeks. I even remember ordering presents and looking at the dates, and everything said it would arrive the 14th to 16th, and everything arrived days ago. Also, we were considering transferring apartments on the 10th, and that was 100% a week ago at least. I thought today was the 19th or 20th, but it's Monday the 13th, and I'm so confused. When I checked the date this morning, I was genuinely baffled, and I'm kind of expecting someone to comment that my phone is wrong. But it goes so much beyond my phone. Case notes, file number 457. I know exactly what happened, 100%. You went back in time because the magic time dust that Santa Claus uses to pause time, so he has enough time to deliver gifts to billions of homes worldwide, somehow fell onto you. At least a little dusting must have. The good news? You don't have to deliver those presents yourself. It's still old Santa's job. The bad news? Disorientation and lack of milk and cookies. Case file number 458, written by Justice of the Unicorns, Secrets of Glitchy Technology and Amazon Magic. Yesterday, my beloved noise-canceling Sony WH-1000XM4 headphones started to have a high-pitched feedback squeal and clicking in my left ear cup. I have found people with the same issue and some possible solutions on Reddit, but none of them worked for me. So I ordered a new one on Amazon. And right after I did that, my headphones started to work normally again. I've been joking that you have to trick your headphones into thinking it's being replaced, and then it will get its act together. Then last night, I canceled the new headphones order since my headphones work now, and partly as an experiment to see if my old headphones would break again if I did that. And of course it did when I tried it again this morning. Clicking and then loud feedback screeches again. Then I turned it off, while it was still sitting on my head, ordered a new one again on Amazon, then turned the headphones back on, and of course it works normally now. Glitch in the Matrix? Or just massive coincidence? Or just high humidity in the room that is causing the issue with the noise-canceling microphone? Creepy file, written by Wolf Dream. Mystery of the 17-mile detour. In 2010, I was driving from New Orleans to Eugene, Oregon. It was just me, 24 female, and my 2-year-old pit bull in a 14-foot U-Haul truck with everything I own crammed into the back, a fancy flip phone, and my printout of MapQuest directions. I think the first smartphones actually came out around that time, but I didn't have one. Cell phone service was also much spottier, and there were long stretches through the desert where I had zero service for hundreds of miles. I was driving a lonely stretch of highway through central Texas when I realized I hadn't seen a town or exit for a very long time, and my giant U-Haul was really low on gas. Just when I'm starting to freak out and seriously run out of gas, I see a small town coming up. I pull into this town and it is tiny. I was so worried about other things that I never did pay attention to the name of the town, but there were only about 6 streets in the whole place. I gas up and I'm ready to get back on the road. Except I cannot for the life of me find my way back to the highway. I circle the town about 4 times and start getting so frustrated because this is such a tiny town. How can I not find my way out? I can literally see the highway, but I can't get to it. I return to the gas station to ask for directions. Now, when I got gas, I paid at the pump and never went in. When I enter for directions, there's a skinny, nondescript guy who has black hair hanging down in front of his eyes that looks like it could use a good wash. He's not particularly creepy, just a little rude. He never really met my eyes. He was looking down at a magazine. He gives me directions that don't sound right at all. He's telling me to take a road that will get me to the highway in about 17 miles. For a moment, I'm dumbfounded. Then I point out that I didn't drive that far to get from the highway into town, so why is it so far to get back to the highway? I can literally see it from the town. He is so casual, almost like I'm just an annoyance and can follow his directions or not. Why should he care? He gives me some explanation about the road curving around that doesn't really make sense. He still doesn't look at me. Just whatever, I gave you your directions, and waved his hand in the direction of the door. When I got into the parking lot, my whole body started trembling violently, and my heart started racing, seemingly for no reason. I got into the truck, and as soon as I put the key into the ignition, I burst into tears. I had the most terrible feeling that no matter how nonchalant he acted, this man had bad intentions. I didn't know what, but I knew right then and there that there was no way I was going to follow his directions. Yet this was the only store in this little town, and short of knocking on doors, no thank you, there was no one else to ask for directions. I decided I didn't give a crap if this town seemed like something dropped out of the Twilight Zone. I was going to drive around until I found my own way out, even if it took all damn night. Then, a big red beater of a pickup truck, as much rust as metal, pulls up and disgorges the quintessential Texas man, huge, husky, and in flannel and work boots. Without even thinking about it, I jumped out of the truck and approached him quickly, yet warily. Looking into his eyes, I saw a kind human being, or at least I was hoping I did. I asked him if he could please give me directions to the highway. I told him I knew it was silly, but I just couldn't seem to find my way back. He looked concerned as I was visibly upset, so he made me laugh and then very cheerfully gave me directions for a hairpin curve turnoff right at the end of the small concrete tunnel I had passed several times. He said it often confused travelers because it was so hard to see. They needed to put up signs, etc. With a sinking feeling in my stomach, I asked him how far in miles was it back to the highway. He laughed and gave me a funny look. Miles, miss? I'd say it's a quarter mile at the most. You can see the highway right from here. At this point, I couldn't help it. I had to know, what happens if I drive? And I gave him the directions the man in the store had given me. The Texas man looked at me very intently and asked me how I knew about that route. It was pretty far out and usually only locals know about it. So I told him. He was quiet for a few minutes and then asked what the attendant looked like and if I had a map of the state. Nope, just my quest map, which wasn't very helpful in this situation. He goes to his truck and grabs a raggedy local map from his glove box. Spreading it out for me, he traces the route I described. The way the man from the gas station had told me to go led me away from town, away from the interstate, and led to seemingly the middle of nowhere. The Texas man told me that the road did go about 17 miles, right before it dead-ended in the desert. I asked him what was out there, and he told me that it was nothing but some junked cars and a few trailers and mobile homes, all owned by the same family. This family was known locally as troublemakers, meth heads, and alcoholics, and these were the nice things townspeople had to say about them. And the erstwhile clerk was part of this family and lived down that road. I'll never forget the look in Texas's eyes as he told me this. He also told me that I was smart to listen to my instincts, and he told me to be very careful traveling out there. I don't know if the man from the gas station wanted what was in the back of my U-Haul or what was in the driver's seat, but thankfully, I didn't have to find out. Oh, and I also learned that sometimes angels look like ruddy-haired Texans with scruffy faces and rusty pickup trucks. Thank you, random Texan stranger. You really saved my butt, and I will always remember you with tons of love. Sorry I didn't ask your name. You're forever Texas to me now. Case file number 459, written by Stepfa, 421. The Secrets of Mark, the Warlock. This is a glitch that I have thought about a lot over the years. I have no explanation. It was just a weird thing that happened. It was 2011. We were 16. My best friend and I were in town, wanting to get some McDonald's. Her card declined, so we were walking to the bank opposite the mall. While we were crossing the road, we saw her older brother's best friend, Mark. We both yelled out, "Hello, Mark." I yelled out, "Nice shirt." It was a lion with flames around it. I remember very well because I had a huge crush on him at the time. He ignored us completely, like he didn't even hear us. We both commented about how rude that was. We finished crossing the road and got to the ATM just on the other side. While there, Mark comes along from the opposite direction. He's wearing the same shirt. We asked him how he got there. We just saw him cross the road and it hadn't gone again, so he couldn't have crossed again. He is very confused and said that he just came from the opposite direction. He hasn't crossed the road yet. I mentioned this to my best friend a week ago, and she remembers the same thing that I do, in the same way. Case file number 460, written by M. Moth Raw, Secrets of the Long Lost Pendant. My favorite story, personal to me, is of my duplicated or returned pendant. In our family, we have a particular pendant that we buy each other as gifts. It's beautiful Isis wings, the Egyptian one, not the terror group, which surrounds a hank. They are hard to come by and have to be handmade. When my daughter was young, she used to pull at the necklace, and one day she must have pulled too hard, and on returning home from dropping her off at the nursery, the necklace was undone and the pendant nowhere to be seen. We searched everywhere and retraced my steps. I was devastated. It wasn't something that could easily be replaced. That Christmas, my mom surprised me with a new handmade one to replace the lost one. Fast forward now, over 10 years. We have moved houses 3 times since then. On the 3rd house move, I was unpacking and went to put my earrings away, which I had put into a little pouch. I emptied the pouch onto our kitchen table to sort out the pairs, but what should be there but my first pendant? It was covered in what I can only describe as a layer of grime. It cleaned up well though, and now has a little home hanging on my candlestick stand on my dressing table. Never sure whether this is a glitch or a little returned gift from the universe. Case notes, file number 460. That little detail you mentioned of the pendant being covered in grime is very peculiar. It's not typical for returned items to be different than they were when they were lost. Makes you wonder that wherever they go, if it's more than a simple out-of-phase instance. In your case, it must be, since the item was returned after moving multiple times. It was tethered to you in some fashion, beyond merely reintroducing itself into the material world in the same location it initially vanished, which is typical in DOP. What could the grime mean? Is it a residue effect in an object's travel while out of phase? Maybe there are other beings in this out-of-phase pocket of reality, beings that are able to see us, and the grime represents wear and tear from the exposed area when moving through it. Creepy file number 2, written by Perpetual Connection. The mystery of the hunter becoming the hunted. I'm a hunter. I like to hunt wild boar specifically. Though I have been deer hunting and have been known to get a turkey for Thanksgiving, I mostly hunt boar. For those of you that don't know, boar are a big problem in the United States. A sow can have 2 litters a year, and it's not uncommon for a litter to consist of 10 or more pigs. Given that pigs eat anything and everything, it's not hard to see why the Department of Fish and Wildlife makes it legal to hunt them with almost no restrictions. In my state, it's illegal to hunt most large mammals with night or thermal vision scopes, with the exception of boar and coyote. I'd been saving for a year, mostly fun money. It's hard to explain to your wife that a scope that cost literally twice as much as the rifle I was mounting it on was worth it. But I did it. I managed to convince her. I took it to a range and sighted it in. There was an area that was peppered with boar activity that I knew would be perfect for a night hunt. It was easily accessible with my truck, with easy to find spots that I could set up in, that overlooked a large easy to navigate clearing. The night started uneventful, mostly me tinkering with my new toy, cycling through the settings. I was a little impatient. I'd spotted multiple deer, but they were out of season, and like I mentioned earlier, my current setup wasn't legal for deer. I moved to another spot I'd seen days earlier that probably wasn't much better than my first, but it gave me something to do and a new angle to look around with my new scope. After an hour or so of glassing the area, it dawned on me. This spot doesn't have much animal activity at all. No rabbits or owls. The deer that I'd seen were hundreds of yards from where I was. Why was this pocket of land so dead at night, but lively in the day? I'd set up around 10 p.m. and it was about 2 a.m. now when I started to think about packing up, maybe setting up a target before I left and taking some practice shots. I heard a crunch come from the direction I came from before. I planned my scope over and saw the silhouette of a small bear pushing through the bushes. It's important to note that my scope isn't exactly night vision. It's a thermal scope, kind of like a black and white version of what you see in the Predator movies. I adjusted my range and zoomed in a little. I remember jolting a little when I saw that it wasn't really a bear, it was a man. Because he was so low and hunched over, I thought I was looking at a young bear. Is that a game warden? It couldn't be. I would have seen the headlights coming up the road from where I was perched. And where could he have walked from? I was 30 miles away from anything and on public lands. I was about to call out when I adjusted my sights and noticed he was naked. No shoes, pants, or anything. I remember being disturbed by his movements, like a squirrel or something, twitchy and grabbing at foliage, sniffing around and palming the tree. Was that my tree? The one I'd been leaning against earlier? The thought terrified me. Could he smell me? Then he did something I still have nightmares about today. He squatted and placed his hands in the dirt between his feet and stared straight up like a dog mid-howl. And I heard it, a voice coming from that direction, a very compelling female voice.
Help! Help!
There was a long pause, but neither of us moved a muscle. The center of my sights was trained on the dirt in front of his feet. I couldn't bring myself to aim directly at another person. It went against everything I'd been taught about firearms. Were they lost? Was this some guy that had gone crazy out here? Why was his voice so feminine?
Someone help! Help!
The voice called out. That's when I knew it was nonsense. Not only could he walk, when I first saw him, he was traversing the land with ease for a naked person. So good I mistook him for a bear. That's a freaking trap. This guy is trying to lure me to him with a damsel in distress routine. Luckily, the lack of activity before had caused me to pack up most of my gear. I think I may have left behind a hat and a sitting pad, but didn't give a crap about that at the moment. I took my eyes off him for a moment to get my pack on. I buckled my chest strap and scrambled for my rifle. To my horror, he was in the same position, but his face was staring in my direction, and I swear I saw a smile. The thermal scope has an effect that makes the animal's eyes appear white. How the hell had he heard me get up and put my gear on? He must have easily been 150 yards away. Damn it! I screamed in that direction. He stood upright, and it hit me how tall and skinny he was, easily 6 feet and very lean. He took a couple long strides in my direction, and I instinctively sent a round sailing above his head to the tree line. He was freaky as hell, but he hadn't really threatened me. What would I tell the cops? I was unwilling and unready to shoot someone. He stopped dead in his tracks and hunched down on all fours. The next one will mess you up. Go away! He stayed on all fours, and this time I had my sights trained on the center of him. His eyes were just above the grass, like a large cat or something. I was trying to stop my trembling and knew that my voice had cracked a little on the last warning. I was terrified. That standoff probably only lasted a minute or two, maybe less, but it felt like forever. In an instant, he bolted left towards a tree line opposite the road. So much for not being able to walk. I could barely keep him in my scope. He was moving so fast. He disappeared into the brush, and I sent another bullet sailing high in his direction. I racked another round and tried to pocket that mag and swap for a fresh one, but I dropped it and didn't bother looking for it. I wasn't far from my truck, and I just wanted to get out of there. I could hear him in the distance, yelling in this weird sound that could have been a laugh or a cry. I scrambled up the trail and arrived at my truck, breathless. I tossed my gear into the cab, but kept the rifle in the passenger seat and sped off. For the longest time, I told that story from the perspective of having spotted some deranged crackhead living off the land like some kind of caveman. I reported it to Fish and Game, but all they did was scold me for hunting at night alone, never receiving an update. It wasn't until I told this story on a camping trip that my nephew told me about wendigos, rakes, and skinwalkers. My story scared the piss out of him because the spot we were camping was technically the same forest I'd seen the bastard, just 50 miles east of it. He was so spooked his mom, my cousin, had to take him home. She was really pissed. I'd gone down the rabbit hole one of these scary stories. I'm not saying what I saw definitely was a wendigo or a skinwalker. I'm saying that if such a thing exists, I may have dodged quite the bullet that night. Or maybe it was just a tweaker doing a Donnie Thornberry in the middle of the night. Either way, I thought I'd share. Bonus file, written by Valor Stick, Secrets of the Boy Who Drowned. I have sisters who are twins. Let's call them Egg and Chicken. Which one was born first? Well, that's irrelevant. Anyways, I spent a lot of time with them as I babysat a lot when my single mom worked, which typically meant I would play PlayStation at home to amuse them. So we had just moved to it was an old house by a creek, house, and the first night I babysat them while it was storming outside, something creepy happened. I was playing Monster Rancher 2 and my sister, Chicken, stared into the room next to us, which happened to be a closed-off porch-type entryway to the home. She was around 3-ish. I would have been 13 or 14-ish at the time, but didn't think too much about it as my other sister, Egg, paid it no mind. They were 3. Children are weird. So the next day, while I was outside with my sister, I noticed the creek had risen a lot, which made sense because of all the rain the previous night. Well, my sister, Chicken, kept clinging to me while we were outside, staring at the little walking bridge that went over the creek. She was normally talkative, but wasn't saying a word, and she eventually wanted me to pick her up, so I did. Egg, in the meantime, was minding her own business, running in circles and humming, which was kind of her morning routine. We did later find out she has autism. I believe Asperger's was the final diagnosis, but they never seemed to settle on it. After Egg finished running around, we went back inside and Chicken finally relaxed a little bit, but she stayed close to me all day. Later that night, it was the usual me playing games with them, sitting next to me or on me. And then out of nowhere, Chicken looks into the entryway and just starts screaming bloody freaking murder. She was pointing into the corner of the entry and screaming, crying. She covered her face and tried to crawl away. I still can't describe how I felt to this day. So I called my grandparents, who rushed over, all the while Chicken was freaking out. They finally arrive, and after a while, she calms down. The next day, everything is like the past 24 to 48 hours, like it never happened. She was happy as a clam after, no issues for weeks. And then it rained and stormed again. To save on time, basically the same stuff happened all over and over again. It would storm, she would be weird about the entryway, and then stare at the walking bridge the next day, and then freak out that night staring into the entryway. It didn't take me long to figure out the pattern of the storms causing her freakouts. Most everyone just assumed she was afraid of them, but that didn't explain a lot of the other behaviors. But I don't think they believed me since I was a teen, taking care of 2 kids. Anyways, the creepiest night happened when Egg, who is usually very quiet, hardly talks, spoke up. At this point, we had lived there for 3-ish months, and Chicken was sleeping in my bed at this point because she was always kind of afraid. It was supposed to storm that night, and instead of having me babysit alone, my grandma and great aunt came over to help. They wanted me to do what I usually do, so I played PlayStation. I think I was onto WWE or F SmackDown 2, if curious. When it started to rain and storm, Chicken lost her crap and started freaking out, pointing at the entryway. Which is odd because she usually didn't do that until the day after the storm. While Chicken is screaming bloody murder, Egg, who hardly spoke or could communicate very well, goes, "Oh," and walks into the entryway, points to the corner and goes, "You mean him?" I cannot describe how heavy the room felt in that instant. I think that was the first time in my life I felt dread. I do not know. That moment is crystallized in my head. I'm not sure how long after though, it felt like time froze. I felt like I could see a lightning bolt permanently sticking out of the ground. That smell of O2 during storms was extra pungent. I could see everything for a mile through the darkness that somehow seemed bright as day. Then in one fluid motion, my grandma and aunt got out and went to the porch. One grabbed Egg, the other opened the door and screamed something like, "You're not welcome here anymore. Leave her alone." She doesn't want to play anymore. And then after that, the rest of the night felt like a blur. And then that was it. She never had a problem with storms again. It turned out, some years before we ever lived there, a little boy had drowned in the creek after it had flooded from a bad thunderstorm. My grandma and aunt had done research into the history of the area and found that out. I guess he just wanted to play with someone one last time. Case file number 461, written by Comprehensive B 29. The secrets behind the universe's curtains. A few months ago, my twin sister and I, 22 female, were eating dinner in my room while we watched a Netflix show. We had carried our meals to my room using trays because we each had a soup bowl, a plate, and a cup. We couldn't carry all of it in one trip. We don't normally use trays for our food, just this one occasion. After dinner, we're both picking up our plates and bowls and setting them back on the tray to carry downstairs. When the glasses clink against each other on the tray, I get this overwhelming sense of déjà vu, as if I've done this exact action, crouching down, picking up plates, and the glass clinking. It was chilling, almost like a memory. I turned to my sister and she has this weird look on her face. I told her I just got déjà vu and she said, "The same thing happened to me when I picked up my tray, I just didn't mention it." We talk about it, a little creeped out, then carry on about our business. As I'm about to walk down the stairs, she stops me and says, "Be careful going down the stairs." And then halfway down the steps, I slip and my tray and plate goes tumbling down the steps. I hurt my tailbone pretty badly. Couldn't sit correctly for like a week. But other than that, I'm fine. I know this doesn't seem super crazy or out of the ordinary, but the fact we both experienced déjà vu at the exact same time was unsettling for both of us. What do you guys think? Case notes, file number 461. There have been quite a few déjà vu glitches in the past month alone, let alone the past year. Am I the only one noticing that they're increasing? And it's not just the stories I'm picking, there are just more everywhere. I'm thinking there's some event coming soon, no idea what. I can feel something in my bones, if that makes sense. Maybe these déjà vus are a sort of sixth sense we're picking up on, extra information, causing the brain to glitch out a bit. Perhaps the developers of this server are feeding us extra info, but they have to be subtle in order to not be fired or disciplined in the real world. Sadly for you, you still fell down even after the warning. Sounds painful. Damn tailbones. Case file number 462, written by Anonymous. Secrets of Forbidden Knowledge. About 5 years ago, one of my 18 female coworkers at my old job didn't show up for her shift one day. The next time we worked together, I asked why she called out the other day. We just so happened to be in the presence of one of our supervisors, and we were all standing close to the entrance. She told us that her house had flooded because her younger brother left the faucet running right before her family went out to dinner. They came back to the house being mildly flooded. Unfortunate, but not too crazy of a story. The next day at work, me, the same coworker, and the same supervisor were standing in the exact same spot as the day prior, close to the entrance, and were talking. I asked my coworker how her house and family were doing. She asked me what I'm talking about and why I would ask that. I said because of her house flooding, of course. She became very visibly upset and bothered and demanded to know how I knew that her house flooded. I became very confused and asked does she not remember telling me literally just yesterday. She insisted that she didn't tell me about her house flooding and demanded to know how I found out this information. I was bewildered and convinced she must be messing with me. She 100% told me and our supervisor about her house flooding. I turned to our supervisor and was like, "Didn't she tell us about her house flooding yesterday?" expecting an obvious yes in response. However, our supervisor said she had no idea that her house flooded. It's the first she's heard about it. I am stunned into almost silence and am incoherently babbling, trying to explain that she definitely did tell us this. My coworker cuts me off and says, "There's absolutely no way you would have known about that. I haven't told anyone about my house flooding aside from our GM, general manager. Not even, insert another coworker's name who is also this coworker's best friend. If I haven't even told her about that, why the hell would I tell you?" She literally looked at me with disgust and stormed off. At that point in time, I'm still convinced that it was some sort of elaborate prank and asked the supervisor who witnessed this whole thing about it again, and she still maintained that she was unaware about her house flooding. If it is a prank, they're keeping to it. This disturbed me greatly, but it's just so weird and insane that I was still convinced they gotta be messing with me or something. So anyway, the next time I worked with that flooded house coworker, I said hello to her and she just glared at me in response and walked off. After that day, it was never the same. We worked together for another 6 months or so, and she continued to avoid me. She was rude to me when we did have to interact and treated me as if I was some stalker creep that was obsessed with her. I swear on my life that she told me about her house flooding. I remember it very vividly, but her reaction to me knowing was so intense, I don't really think she was faking that. My supervisor also maintained that she never actually told us about it. I even talked to her best friend about it, who also said she had not previously known about the house flooding. Her best friend told me that it was always best to just leave the topic alone and to leave flooded house girl alone. I have no explanation for this, and when I tell people about this situation, they just tell me I'm freaking crazy or making it up. I don't know how to explain it. I don't even believe in parallel universes, but I don't know what else it could be besides a switch up in my timelines. I don't know. It haunts me though. I think about it all the time, and it just makes me feel sick. Bonus file, written by Serious About This Crap. Secrets of Saving My Daughter from a Door Monster. This happened several years ago. My daughter was about 8 years old at the time. I was 29, male. I woke up early this morning, 1 or 2 a.m. At first, I didn't think much of it. I peacefully woke up, kinda just looked at the ceiling for a minute, and then turned my head towards the bedroom door. I could see the next light in my daughter's room slowly, softly, change from one color to the next. It lit up the hallway. The phases from one color to the next lasted only a few seconds. Yellow, blue, green, then red. I always thought the red was a bit dark, a blood red. I watched it go through the cycle a couple times. It turns red one last time. I don't think much of it until it doesn't change. It stays red. I think to myself, what the hell? But I just wait thinking eventually it'll change. It doesn't. At this point, enough time has passed and I'm like, okay, what the hell is going on? So I decided to go check it out. But I couldn't move. I was paralyzed. It seemed like the more I struggled, the harder it was to move. The panic started to creep in, and with every second that passed, the more panicked I became. Then, my daughter let out this horrible scream. The kind of scream you never want to hear, let alone from your own child. It was horrifying. I knew something terrible was happening to her, but the more I tried to move, the harder it became. I was freaking out. It went silent. Still, I'm struggling to get out of bed. A few seconds went by, then another blood-curdling scream. Suddenly, I was released and sprang out of the bed, only to face-plant on the ground. My legs didn't work. I couldn't feel my legs at all, but I had to save my daughter. So entirely naked, I started to crawl to my daughter's room, ready to kill whatever was causing her harm. She let out one last scream as I approached the door to her room. I mustered the strength to stand up and flip the lights on. "What? Are you okay? What?" She's in the corner of her room, curled up, the look of pure fright on her face. She ran to me and jumped in my arms. That crap scared the hell out of me. Once she calmed down, she told me she woke up and was just laying there watching her light change colors. Then it changed to red and stopped. She started to get scared and was going to come to my room, but then her bedroom door turned into a large mouth with sharp teeth and started coming toward her and chomping up and down. Just before it got to her, I turned the light on and saved her. What the hell? How is this possible? I have sleep paralysis the exact same time my daughter had a night terror, and they seemingly were connected. Or was this paranormal? Case file number 463, written by 420 BPM, Secrets of a Transdimensional Slide. When I was about 6 or 7 years old, I went with my parents to a big hardware/gardening store. Those living in Europe probably know which one I'm talking about. And since they had to spend some time choosing tiles and other things, they put me in this ball pit with slides and jumping beds that was full of other kids. I remember seeing kids getting into the slide holes and then appearing in the ball pit. I wanted to do the same, so I chose one slide, but that slide didn't take me to the ball pit. Instead, I ended up in an empty cube made of plastic that was big enough for me to stand up in. I remember I could see people on the street through the thick plastic wall, but it was all blurred. I also remember thinking that maybe that part of the playground was still under construction, but why would that slide be open then? Also, how could I be the only kid there? Surely another kid could have used the same slide, but there I was alone, and I waited for 10 to 15 minutes there before trying to climb up the slide. I don't remember how, but in the end I came out of the cube and waited until my parents were done shopping. They picked me up and we went home. I'm 29 now and never mentioned any of this to them. Case note, file number 463. This is reminding me of those playpens in McDonald's. I used to go in those all the time as a kid. I remember begging my mom to let me go play in the slides, even though I was pretty young at the time. I guess that's what they're there for, but my mom was always nervous I'd hurt myself. Moms. You know what they're like. For your glitch, it's curious. This reminds me of another story where it was a water park and there was a worker at the top of a slide. You know, the ones you actually have to walk upstairs to get to? Anyway, he sends a kid down the slide and that kid never comes out of the end. Not for like 10 minutes. And he even sent other kids through because he just thought, oh, he must have come out and I didn't notice him. But no, the kid does eventually come out 10 minutes later after he sent other kids through, which would be impossible. Obviously, they would get stuck. So in your case, maybe you were the one that vanished to other people, although no one noticed because they were just kids, so they weren't paying attention. And then you just climb back out into your universe. I would say maybe it's just a coincidence, but 10 to 15 minutes in the same play area as other kids, well, there's no way that only you would pick that slide. Case file number 464, written by Wet Pirate Plunder Pictures, Secrets of Mortality, and the Giant Woman. I think I should attempt to define what an ultra-terrestrial is. In theory, since many people may not have heard the term, multi-dimensional entity. Similar to the idea of an eternal soul, not bound to space and time or to the physical plane which humans currently inhabit. The extent of ultra-terrestrial behaviors and motives are unknown, but they are likely diverse, just as any other intelligent life forms are, so they do not function as a perfect collective. The first time I believe I encountered an ultra-terrestrial was in 2013, when I was extremely sick. I was at home and dealing with a very serious disease that kills 30% of its hosts. At the height of my sickness, I thought for sure I was going to die, and was struggling to come to terms with it. I was in bed, sweating, finding it difficult to breathe, and had shooting pains throughout my entire body. My heartbeat felt completely off, going from pounding to fluttering to skipping beats at random times. I was terrified, almost literally to death. It was at that point that I witnessed, or hallucinated, a dark, shadowy figure step out of my closet. It looked like the Grim Reaper, the Angel of Death almost. I pleaded, "Please, don't let me die. I have more to accomplish here. I'm not ready to go yet." The shadowy figure slowly backed away into the closet, and I uncomfortably began to drift off to sleep. As I fell asleep, I remember thinking, I want to talk to a god. I need answers. The next thing I remember is I had the most incredibly vivid dream, which at the time didn't seem like a dream at all. It seemed like I had been transported somewhere, because I was completely lucid and fully aware. I was in an infinite space that was a color tan. All around me was tan, like the color of sand. There was a gigantic woman floating in front of me, and I was about the size of one of her fingers. She is just floating there, amazingly beautiful. She had a flowing dress and dark reddish hair. The first thing I said was, "Am I going to die? What happens when we die?" She responded, "Death is a construct. Death does not exist. It is a made-up human concept." At this point, you're probably thinking, okay, this guy is obviously sick and hallucinating, so this can't be an ultra-terrestrial encounter, and that is a perfectly reasonable thought. I don't claim that this encounter was definitely real. How could I? But at the time, it felt very real, and it felt like I was talking to a very real entity. It did not feel like a dream or a scene that was created by my mind. This woman, or entity, continued to tell me that I have lived thousands of lives, and she even showed me first-person point-of-view experiences that I have had as different animals and people. We talked and talked for what felt like almost days, and she explained to me how reincarnation works. Keep in mind, at the time, I was not spiritual or versed in the idea of reincarnation at all. This was a completely foreign concept to me at the time, and if you had asked me in 2013 if I believed in this stuff, I would say heck no. She said that each of our physical lives is double the length of time of the life we had previously, but that time is not what we would think of on Earth, but another form of universal time. So the length of time you spend in your current life may be shorter in years than your past life, but that doesn't mean it's shorter in this universal form of time. She explained that because I am human currently, I will not be able to understand most of these concepts, but that she had presented herself in a human form to explain these details to me. When I woke up the next morning, I felt completely weak. My heart was beating very faintly, but steadily. I literally felt like I had died and been reborn. When I moved my body, it felt like it had been days since I last used it, but the fear of death I had was completely gone. I would compare my headspace to what you might feel after a psychedelic trip. All of my negative feelings were completely gone, and I felt so grateful. I made a promise to the universe that I would not waste this precious time I had on Earth, and I wouldn't live my existence in fear. Long story short, this interaction with this entity changed my reality in a great way. I have become so much more positive and open to all types of ideas. I truly feel as though I was given a gift. Since 2013, I often witness what I believe are other entities in my bedroom, but they are not malicious at all. It's almost like they're helping me, sending me information or something. And I know that sounds batshit crazy, but I can literally see them and feel them when I wake up sometimes. I would say at least 6 or 7 times a month, I will wake up in my bed and will see an ultra-terrestrial hanging out in my room. They look really interesting, like abstract shapes. They are never in any animal or human form. The reason I believe they are ultra-terrestrials and not hallucinations is how they seem to react to me waking up. I will see them and they immediately start to change forms and usually exit through the wall, or sometimes they will fly right out of the window. There may be good ultra-terrestrials and there may be bad ones, but to make a distinction may be extremely difficult because they are so incredibly advanced in their evolution and they fully understand that death itself is an illusion, my belief. We as humans are made not fully capable of seeing this limitless, multi-dimensional reality as it exists, and are much more attuned to mortality-based fear and the biological survival mechanisms of our animal forms. What we see as bad is largely based on our idea that death is very real and very much the end, which is not true in my opinion.